Topic today is personality assessments. And I think, based on the number of people that fill out the little quizzes on the different social media that we see out there, people like learning about themselves or getting insights about themselves. And in a way, that's what a personality assessment is. It can help predict how people may respond in different situations. It can sometimes help to screen job candidates. And the reason that I really like them, it can be a great job search self-assessment tool. That's where I find a lot of value. Now, it shouldn't be the only tool. I'm going to say that as a career counselor, because it's not, a hard science. So it is more informative and informational. There's different types of personality assessments. So just to give you a brief overview before we start talking about some of them, there's something called a psychometric test. And that's going to identify your skills, knowledge, and even personality qualities to test for abilities. So sometimes that's used, when we're going through interviewing stages. A personality psychometric test actually identifies a personality type. Again, my personal take on that is it's fluid, but I'm looking forward to hearing what our guest speakers have to say about that. And finally, a personality assessment measures characteristic trait patterns, again, across different situations. Now, that's all to say you don't need to really know what that is. We'll talk about some tools we're familiar with, but there's generally two types of personality assessments. And the first and the most common, and probably the most valuable, I think, is self-report inventories. So you read a question and then you rank how well it applies to you. In some assessments, it's either yes or no, but generally it's going to be on a scale and you rank your abilities. So really it's only going to be as accurate as what you put in and how well you understand yourself. Projective tests ask people to interpret information. So think about, I don't know if you're familiar, the Rorschach ink blot test, where they give you this, inky image and you have to say, well, here's what I see. All right. You will rarely encounter that, I think, when you're going through employment testing or assessments. I've got a screen grab of an assessment that I particularly like, which is the Lumina Spark, and it's free on our system, so yay. And a lot of organizations use it. But basically, the benefits of personality assessments is you can get to know yourself better, or find different language to describe yourself, different terminology that's maybe more effective. You can understand how you react and interact with situations and with other people. So increasingly, a lot of these tests have an element where you learn about how you interact and communicate with others. And that can be valuable. And again, it may change over time as you get new skills, but at its core, for a point of time where you are now, it can be valuable. Generally, personality assessments will identify your likes and dislikes, strengths and weaknesses, not all of these, not on everyone, but generally, dominance, conscientiousness, agreeableness, extroversion and introversion, and thinking and feeling continuums. So it's not that you're one or another, you're on a continuum. So on the one you see on the screen, we have things like, am I people focused? Where am I on that continuum? Am I introverted? Am I down to earth? So we see by this splotch in the middle that this person's pretty well balanced across most of these dimensions. Some familiar personality assessments would be two that I've got up here that I wanted to mention. We'll go through a third in a minute. But the first one on the left is from Personality Dimensions. And sometimes we call this the color chart. And basically, they help give you a better understanding of yourself, your strengths, values, needs, and how you perceive the world. It's accessed through a certified personality dimensions trainer. I do have that certification, but I don't currently work in that section, but I have taken it. It is valuable. So you can see that there's 4 different colors. So that's why it's sometimes called the what are your colors? And then they fall into different dimensions. 4 dimensions, you're always some combination of the 4, but you might have some dominant characteristics. And the great thing about the personality dimensions is if you're blue, it can give you insights into how you interact with orange people. Okay, or if you're green, which is more of a scientific logical bent, it can tell you how you interact with highly organized yellows. Okay, so that's one example. Another one that a lot of people are familiar with is the Myers-Briggs. That's probably the most famous personality tool out there. You can access it online. And Myers-Briggs assesses your psychological preferences, so you can see how the world is, see how you see the world, how you interact with the world, and how you make decisions. My understanding is it's generally a paid-for tool, but again, Wikipedia tells us it's a self-report inventory, so you're filling it out. What's interesting about the Myers-Briggs is it's a yes/no, an either or. It's not a continuum. And you get 4 letters that describe you in order of dominance. So are you extroverted, introverted? Are you sensing or intuitive? Are you thinking, feeling, and are you judging or perceiving? So that's another interesting tool. A lot of big companies use it. Now I'm going to ask for some help on this Lumina Spark competency framework. Elizabeth Moeller is on with us today. Delighted to have her. Elizabeth, let me find your bio, Elizabeth, so I can read out the correct bio. Elizabeth is a project coordinator with Magnet at Ryerson University. She has the lived experience of having a disability. She's currently a PhD candidate at Western University pursuing her doctorate in disability studies. She's also a good friend of mine. Thank you for joining me, Liz.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So I've got the Lumina Spark competency framework. Can you talk a little bit about Lumina Spark and explain what it is to everybody that's here today?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lumina Spark is a psychometric assessment. It's not a test. There's no right or wrong answers. It's 144 questions. And really the goal of Lumina is to help you start to think about what personality qualities or attributes or strengths do you bring to a role? So the goal really isn't to tell you you're good at this or bad at this, but really to help give you some language or some guidance around how to speak about yourself. When we all get that dreaded question in an interview, can you tell me about yourself? It gives you some words to do that, as well as language for your resume and cover letter. What I really like about Lumina, well, there are many things, but I think one of the things is that, the competencies are really broken down in such a way that when you're looking at them, it gives you language, but it also gives you a lot of visuals to help you sort of identify who you are in a more visual way, if that's the type of learner that you are. Lumina is free through discoverability up until June. And the other nice thing about Lumina is that when you're taking the assessment, it's done in a very language positive way. So what I mean by that is it doesn't say, I'm not extroverted, or I'm not somebody that likes to be in big groups. It gives you really positive language in the questions, and it shows you how, rather than being either or, you can be on that continuum from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So it might say something like, I generally see myself as collaborative. So that's not good or bad, but it's really helping you sort of think through who you are along that continuum.
Great. And I notice, for instance, as a job counselor, I wouldn't tell someone, don't go into an interview and use the word introverted. But what I like is as we move outside the circle, there's some better words to use, which you mentioned. So you might say, I'm measured, or I'm very, I observe well. So we're using language that doesn't typecast us when we're looking for jobs, but give us some other language to use.
And I think one of the things that's beautiful about Lumina is that it can take a word like, I'll use my own, I'm pretty red, that says tough. And people might think that's really bad at first. But when you actually unpack it in your Lumina competencies, you'll see that really what tough means is you're able to have those difficult conversations, and you're able to really pursue tough situations in the workplace. And that's really desirable. So again, it isn't about strong or weak, but really about seeing what your strengths are and where your qualities are in a really colorful visual way, as well as giving you lots of words to use through the word clouds.
Now, when you do the Lumina Spark, which again is free until June on our system, so we're not getting paid for this. This is just something that we've arranged. We hope that when you sign up, when you create an account, it will come across and ask you if you want to do the Lumina Spark personality profile. If you've never done one, this is a good chance to dive in. But you do get a report. Can you tell me a bit about the report, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so the report that you're going to get really breaks down sort of your qualities, your 8 kind of top characteristics, if you will. So, kind of starting at the top, it gives you a little description about who you are. Again, perfect for sort of talking about yourself or being able to really evaluate your abilities. And then it kind of breaks down with word clouds. So the bigger words being where you're maybe have more of that quality, and the smaller words maybe where you have less of a certain quality. So mine are tough, discipline driven, focused, task oriented. So those are my bigger words. And then it also has sort of a splash that again you can see using those 4 colors. And we talked about those in the other assessments. Although just to confuse you, the colors here mean different things than they do in Myers-Briggs. So red is very tough, direct. Communication is strong in red. Blue is very down to earth and discipline driven. Green is your empowering, your people focused, and then yellow is your sort of artsy, your ideas. So those colors are different. So don't be confused if you've done other assessments, but really looking at yourself in terms of the colors as well as the words and helping you kind of figure out, okay, what are some things that I can use to talk about myself in a very positive way?
Now, I'm also joined today and delighted to be joined by Camila Borgatti. And Camila is a manager, executive support and communications, and she provides management and operational support to the president and CEO of OTEC and the senior leadership team, as well as developing employee engagement initiatives and executing special projects. She holds a bachelor's degree of journalism, a master's degree in marketing from UCS University, Brazil, and a public relation and social media management diploma. Camila, I know you're really familiar, and one of the things you said to me that you really like is the app portion, which we can see on this final page here. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, hello, it's Camila speaking here. Thank you, Lisa. I'm also a Lumina certified practitioner since last year, October, and I have been delighted to get to know the tool, share that with my colleagues, my senior leadership, and also host meetings, team meetings where we are exploring this report, the results of these reports, and applying either for individuals to get to know themselves better, as well as to improve their relationships as a team, and also senior leadership, so understanding how their employees are, how they prefer to behave, improving their relationships. So we have used the app as an added support to the report itself. Not always you have the opportunity to be in front of a computer and have the document open or printed with you, but the app actually brings that to a mobile environment where if you are prior to an interview or you don't remember, you were nervous and you want to share with someone, or maybe even ask for feedback, maybe a person that you know and you trust, and you want to share the findings and ask if that person perceives that on you, if that's something you show strongly or no. So you have that information very handy for you and available, easy access. You can share with others. We have encouraged our team members to share, because prior to a meeting and a conversation, it is an extra resource that you have to prepare for a positive outcome. So you remember the details, you can look through and understand, okay, let me just check if this person has similar personality to me, my approach will work, or if that person is different, they might be looking for more details or more big picture. So it will help your approach and the positive outcome if you provide and you understand a little bit of who you are speaking with. So the Lumina app brings this possibility of making the tool and the report dynamic that you can have on your phone and don't need to be necessarily, oh, I need to have my computer, I have an email, it's at home, it's printed. So that's the benefit I see.
Now, Elizabeth and I have both taken the personality dimensions. It actually helped me with updating my profile on discoverability. And we are both mostly red. It's basically a giant red splash with very little else. Okay, what are you, Camila, when you took it? Where do your preferences lie?
So in my everyday, and I like to always divide, emphasize that Lumina.
Great point, by the way.
Yeah, Lumina divides the results into 3 personas, which makes a difference because they show underlining persona. That's your private self. When you are at home, when you are with your loved ones and your family, you were not worried about being judged and observed by others. And then your everyday persona, that's what you bring to work. And the overextended, that means when you are using your strengths, your positive qualities too much to a point where it can become harmful. And those preferences are different in each persona. So you really being able to work on the persona that you actually bring to work, it is important to see the difference between who you are at home and what you prefer and what you think you need to adapt in your personality and your behaviors to achieve your outcomes, your goals, you complete your tasks or approach your team. So those qualities that you prefer are different. And it's one of the things that I like. So at work, answering your question, Lisa, I'm a yellow, a big picture thinking, very sociable. I like networking. I like promoting things. So doing communications, employee engagement, as you just heard Lisa saying on my bio, is my characteristic is to connect with people, so very HR, and then green, so people's focused. So that's where I guess it led me to be where I am today, working on communication, employee engagement, internal comms, branding, marketing. So that's how I used as well this information previously to shape my career based on my qualities and the ways I prefer.
That's a great example, actually, Camila, because we actually had somebody in the chat say, can you give me real world examples of applications? And you've actually done that. For myself, you know, on different, Lumina definitely, but also I'm a little bit older, so I've been doing these for a little bit longer. You know, I'm kind of extroverted in work, not at home, but extroverted at work and also outcome focused. So it led me to become an employment counselor. I want to get people hired. That's my outcome, right? And it really allowed me to zone in on that. And I feel comfortable talking to people. So an extrovert, and it led me to training. And, you know, I, again, gave me a lot of language that I can use on my resume, that I can add to profiles, that we can use in our interview. But we're going to dig down into that in a bit. Now, we got our 2 experts who've also used Lumina, but they've also done other tests, and we're going to talk about those. But we've also got a recent user of Lumina Spark. So I'd like to introduce her and invite her into the conversation. I'd like to welcome Madeline Kelly, who is the Discoverability Network's campus ambassador at Queen's University. She earned her Bachelor's of Science in Biology with honors from Acadia University, and she's another PhD candidate. You and Liz will have a lot in common. But you're a PhD candidate in the School of Environmental Studies at Queen's, doing your research with Public Health Ontario. So you took, Madeline, the Lumina Spark personality recently. Tell us, you know, about what that was like, whether you found it difficult, what you found most useful, what were some of the insights that you got from that tool?
Yeah, so I guess just to kind of start about the color distribution that I got first, I was mostly in green, blue, and the purple. And I can definitely see how that is reflected in my PhD and how I've chosen to do a PhD. Being very discipline driven, I'm able to motivate myself. And, you know, in a PhD program, a lot of it is really self-motivation and getting things done by your own deadlines. And in terms of the people focused, I love working in teams. And so especially with my lab, where I've got a number of colleagues where all of our research kind of intermingles and we publish with each other, that's something I really value and I thrive in a team environment as far as my color distribution goes. In terms of the personality traits that kind of came out of it, it did help me reinforce my knowledge in terms of traits I already knew I had. So for example, it pointed out that I'm quite introverted. However, as Elizabeth mentioned, it framed this in a positive light, which was really refreshing, as I'm sure many introverted people can relate to. It's not always framed as a positive thing. So it said, I have great listening skills, that people find it really easy to talk to me, and I enjoy working in smaller groups. However, I've known this about myself my whole life, so it wasn't a huge surprise. Where it got interesting for me was when it made apparent certain traits or behaviors that I've maybe occasionally heard from colleagues or employers, but I wasn't sure how true they were. So the biggest surprise for me in my assessment was that it pointed out I have a tendency to be too modest, which was interesting to me as I've heard it from colleagues in my field. And in the field I'm currently in, which is academia, you really kind of need to be your own cheerleader, and especially with regards to not being shy about sharing your published work. That's kind of the core of academia. So that was interesting to hear, and it gives me something totally new to work on for myself and for my career.
So that's really interesting. So it actually gave you some direct real world application, not only in confirming what you're good at, but also maybe where you could have an opportunity to improve.
Yes, definitely.
Excellent. Do you have any questions for our guests, Madeline?
Yeah, Elizabeth, so now that I've kind of got this personality assessment and I can see how it's going to work in my current career, but how would one go about using personality assessments in a job search?
I think a couple of different things. Like we've said before, it's really helpful in terms of language on your resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, certainly describing yourself. I know that as somebody with a disability, sometimes in my career, I haven't had as much experience as my able-bodied peers, or I don't have experience that's commensurate because perhaps I took longer to finish school, or I was volunteering and trying to gain skills. But I think sometimes rather than focusing on that, what the assessment can allow me to do is talk about other soft skills that I bring or other qualities that I bring to the job. And that can be really helpful when you're trying to sort of address those resume gaps, which can feel very daunting. I think that the Lumina can really help you identify where those gaps are and then sort of talk about them in a way that's much more positive.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Camila, do you have anything to add to that question?
Yes, I would say that Lumina can help you to find your qualities. So identifying what are your key strengths, what are your weaknesses, as well as Lumina brings suppressions and amplifications. So Lumina has an exercise that's called Journey to Composure that's available as well. So you can work on identifying what are your qualities that are underlining or everyday, which is at your most at the home, less social quality profile to your at work profile, and what are you suppressing and amplifying, and how much that's costing you in terms of draining your energy maybe. So these all can be identified using this assessment. I would say also build out your resume with use for interviews, answers, and questions. So I have helped people daily to organize their resumes for the ever-changing environment, mostly right now. And I have seen a tendency of people adding this information to their resumes because more and more companies are using and are familiar with this language. So they are already ahead of the time discussing competencies, attitudes, behaviors to understand the company fit. So I think this is some additional information that actually provides good opportunity to talk about your qualities and show them your strengths, or maybe even that you are aware about opportunities for improvement, as well as helps you and your team or the company that's about to hire you, what's your working style, what's your personality, giving insights to something that's more concrete, and you feel free to explain and give examples. So it brings resource to the conversation and likely will end in a more successful interview. So I think today because of this virtual environment, we want to try to know each other a little better, understand and create that connection first, and see if you really create that trust when you are interviewing between candidate and the hiring manager. And I think that brings the content for this conversation.
Perfect. Thank you both. So for the next question, maybe we'll start with Camila this time, and then Elizabeth can jump in afterwards. But in your views, are there any limitations to these personality assessments?
I consider so, yes, there are limitations. There is no 100%, and we change over time. We're humans. So it's not a one-time data that you collect and should remain the same. I think it changes and evolves over time. More researchers come every time that are implemented and embedded and are aiming to improve. I think that's what we expect as well, that to see more and more research and understand better and make sure we can trust this information that we are receiving. Also, I think some tests really identify that some profiles are better than others. And it's something that I personally don't believe. I think, yes, you have qualities that will lead you to develop tasks with more connection and pleasure, but also you can develop yourself and achieve that goal, developing your skills, not necessarily just relying on personality and preferences. So they set as a better profile for this profession, better profile for this company, maybe for the company as a company fit, but not for the profession or the task itself. So you can, be better for that work if you work on your skills and develop yourself and then fit into the environment, but not saying that, well, this person is better than any other one. So I think these are risks that you can find. Also, the cost, there is the tool at this point is available for free. So I think really people should take advantage until June, but most of them are costly and have that additional fee attached. And sometimes if you want to have the debrief with a coach will be an additional cost on top of just the report. So in my opinion, there are barriers, but there are resources as well. There are free assessments if ultimately you don't have the capability of investing. There are free options that can be used. And the most important piece for me is that you start to recognize and to have that self-awareness.
Perfect. Thank you, Camila. And Elizabeth, do you have anything to add?
I guess in terms of, limitations, one thing that comes to mind for me, and Camila touched on, is sort of a snapshot, right? So although it has been noted that with Lumina, your personality portrait doesn't change a whole lot over time, it is a snapshot, and it's one part or one tool that can be used in addition to many other tools out there, including your resume and cover letter. But I think sometimes the other limitation is, especially as people with disabilities, sometimes assessments can seem biased, or we feel like we're being assessed against able-bodied standards. So sometimes that's a limitation to think about, but also to know that with Lumina, the language is designed in a very neutral, non-biased way.
Madeline, can I jump in there as a person who's certified in some of these as well? So I think with all these assessments or tests or inventories that you take, there's a couple things that have been shown, so is it valid? That's something that you want to look at. And sometimes Camila mentioned you can have somebody who's certified to interpret the results for you. So is it measuring what it's saying it's supposed to measure? And does it have predictive power? So those things fall under validity. And I'm not sure always that that's the case, because they're self-report. If you don't have a good understanding of yourself, it may just reflect back that poor understanding of yourself. So, the mood you're in can affect it. That's the poor reliability or reliability scale of it. So if you took it a year later, is it the same? And that's, to Elizabeth's point, it's a snapshot in a moment. So a really excellent tool, but it's not predictive. And it shouldn't give us a sense of false confidence that this is always how I am. So you mentioned, Madeline, that you consider yourself to be an introvert. And yet here you are, really confident talking. So we did, I don't think
that's very true.
yeah, so I don't think you want it to limit yourself in terms of opportunities, or go, gee, I can't be speaking to a whole bunch of people on a recording that's going to, go out to hundreds of people because I'm an introvert. So I think that, that idea of giving us false confidence or limiting ourselves, being pigeonholed, we should be really aware on any tool that it doesn't do that. It might not be comprehensive, and again, I like the Lumina tool because it gives you that personas across, like what's your everyday underlying, what's your one at work, and so on. So, I think that works a little bit better. It's one of the reasons why we're really supportive of the Lumina Spark tool. And finally, and this would be, I've done MBTI. My concern is the wording of the questions. So clear, concise language so that you're answering the question that's being asked, not the one you think is being asked. So when we're looking at these tools, you want to consider all those factors. And I think they can be limitations and they can be strengths if the organization has done them well. So that would be my 2 cents in there.
Thank you, Lisa. That's a great point you brought up.
Okay, let's ask Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you've used this tool. I know Camila has too. So I'm going to ask you to share any stories or anecdotes from how people, back to Grant's question in our chat, how they've used this tool to learn, to move forward, either in job search or in their career, because it doesn't have to be just job search. It may help us in our career as well. So let's start with you, Elizabeth, and then over to Camila.
For sure. So we at Magnet received a really wonderful testimonial from a job seeker that indicated they were experiencing difficulty how to talk about themselves, not just in interviews, but also in networking and on LinkedIn, which is a form of networking. And that the Lumina assessment really provided some clear language that made them feel confident in how to speak about themselves beyond their disability and focus on their abilities and their strengths.
Yeah, so for me, the testimonial that I have a friend that was a mother of 2 15-year-old daughters. And after 15 years, she was trying to go back to the job market. She did not know how to talk about herself, how to address herself in either resume or job interviews. She was away from the market for too long. So we did the Lumina Spark portrait to provide her with resources and even help her to identify how can she find a task or a job position that actually speaks to her heart, and she wants to dedicate the next 15 to 20 years, or at least start a journey on that way, seeking for that reallocation or going back, because at that point she had lost initially, did not feel connected with her studies anymore. And after so many years, she wanted to pursue something that spoke to her heart. So Lumina really helped us to identify her key strengths and then look into positions or jobs that would make her exposed to those. So she had the education, but she wanted to make a change. And really, she changed over those 15 years. So really, the person that she was before, after so long and being at home, taking a different function that's as difficult, but again, going back into a professional life was for her something very difficult to accomplish. And thanks to Lumina, I see her now. Even today, I saw on Facebook that she's attending webinars for being interpreter. So I believe this is helping and giving clarity for her so she can look for opportunities in webinars to develop herself and reallocate them.
It's so true. I mean, I think we like to think our personality is set in stone and who we were born is who we are forever. But I mean, can you imagine hiring someone who's never learned anything over the 20 years of being hired? They wouldn't be an ideal employee. We're constantly learning, constantly changing. constantly growing and getting new skills that can help us. I'll share a story and then I'll see if you guys have any more, but for 2 different assessments that I took. So when I went back to school to learn to be a career counselor, I did one tool, and everybody in our course took it. And I was one of the few people, so I tend to be on that extrovert scale at work. And though I consider myself an introvert, funnily enough, but when I'm in a work scenario, it's almost like a face that I put on, and I'm quite, confident because my job requires that. But it came back in the class that everyone was saying, you're going to make a terrible career counselor because, you're not a people-focused person. You're an outcomes-focused person. And I really struggled with that because it felt like, wow, it didn't feel like a good thing, let's say. And then when I took the Lumina, it kind of reinforced what the other one had said. And it said, you're tough and you're logical, right? But then it gave me these incredible way of reframing it, which was, you can have difficult conversations with people about difficult topics. And that's basically what career counselors do. Unemployment's difficult. And sometimes you have to tell people, wow, your resume doesn't look great. You have to upgrade your skills. Maybe your skills aren't aligned with what you're looking for right now. Those are difficult conversations to have. And I'm completely comfortable having those. And it made me rethink that initial one, which was, you're not people focused, to, wow, no, you're tough, you're logical, but that's a good thing for your career choice. And so I love that it gave me a new way of seeing myself and seeing the skills that I bring. Again, people focus is a great thing for employment counselors, but so can tough and outcome focus be. Do you have any other stories you guys would like to share before we move on to the next question?
I think
nope, dead silence.
Sorry, I think I have my own even. I come from a different country, so I'm an immigrant where I had to learn the language from zero. I did not come with any abilities, really. My English skills were really beginners, so I had to learn English and also learn about the industry, learn about how I would feel and behave in the workplace, and change my position, because initially I did not have the level of English necessary to rejoin the market in Canada with exactly the same skills, or only my competencies, not my English skills on the ability to communicate to that level. So really helped me understanding my profile, my qualities, my strengths were able to help me to find a way to think outside of the box, because if I wanted to pursue exactly the same career I had back home, it would take me much longer, because being a journalist in English in another language would take me a much longer career path. And I don't even know if it would make me happy at the end. So knowing my skills, knowing my qualities, my preferences, I was able to think outside the box of other options that would make me as happy, but would be in a shorter period of time. I would be confident enough to perform my tasks and and look for positions that would help me to really afford living in Canada, mostly now with the growing cost of life. So I think that's strategic, if anything, right? Like, helps you to shape where you can go and how fast you can get there based on your needs. And so I think that's how it really helped me to see beyond, and not only think that, oh, because I'm a communicator and extrovert and social and I socialize, being a journalist or in the communications industry is my only option. So I think it really helped me to shape my career path in a way where I'm as happy, maybe even more now.
I'm going to end by asking, are there any other tools or assessments that people know out there that they would like to recommend? I love the strong interest inventory. You've got to pay for it. You need someone to interpret it. But I found it an incredible tool, strong validity on it. And, you know, for me, it was really interesting because I'd gone back to school to become a career counselor because I didn't through an error, didn't get accepted into the program that I wanted. And so ended up taking a career counselor, and then it said to me, oh, #1 career fit, career counselor. And it was like, wow. And it basically looks not only at your interests self-reported, but it compares them against people currently in the industry to, you know, predict and align. So I'm a huge fan of the strong interest inventory. Anybody else have any favorites that they like?
I like Clifton's strengths. It's 177 pairs or statements that you're asked to identify with, and then your report is broken down into themes. There are 34 themes, and it kind of gives you language to use as well. Things like futuristic or individualized, responsible. My favorite is wow, the ability to win others over. That's a really important trait. Things like focused, so similar to Lumina, but really, again, focused on your strengths. It was developed by Donald Clifton as based off Strengths Finder. So I like that one.
Yeah, Strengths Finder is great. Done that one as well. Camila, any that you particularly like or are familiar with?
Yes, I have taken the tool called DISC. So DISC, that stands for dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. It actually is similar to Lumina on the outcome. I have done that twice because we recommend, and it's very interesting, every 3-4 years or every change of milestone or big change in your life, it is recommended you to take the test again, because it can have drastic changes in your personality depending on factors that you might go through over 3 to 4 years interval. So even take DISC twice within, I guess, 5 years really showed an evolution and a change. And I believe it's based on my career evolution. So also taking Lumina, they were very similar. I like how they portray the personalities, the 4 personalities, and I think it is accessible, easy to read, so makes it more engaging, also colorful. The colors are very similar, not over complicating, so they have less questions. Sometimes it's, you know, faster option. I like the similarities and how they portray the easy to understand, simple language. I like the similarities as well. So it made me trust that both of them really portrayed who I feel I am, how I see myself. So provided, I believe those are good options.
Okay, we're going to go to questions in a minute. And Jeff, I'll have, when we get to the question part, we'll end the recording so that people can ask their questions in private. But I'm going to ask Madeline. So you're the first time user. Have you done any other self-assessments prior to this?
I think maybe I had done the colors assessment in high school, like in grade 9 or 10, but no, nothing beyond that.
And did you find this, like, comparatively, if you remember back to then, you know, did you find this useful? I mean, it sounds like it really did give you some insights into how you could help your career with it. Is that fair?
Yeah, it definitely gave me new insights, you know, things that I'd heard over the years, but you could just kind of wonder, oh, is that, you know, someone saying that, or are they just being nice? And I think the biggest thing, you know, comparing it to the high school, was I very much was pigeonholed, as you guys have mentioned, into the introverted category. And over my whole, up until university, you know, that was always negative feedback from my teachers, was you don't raise your hand enough, you don't talk enough. And so I came to view it in a very negative light, which it's not necessarily. It's got lots of positives to it, and it's something you can work on. To your point, here I am presenting. Clearly, I have gotten more comfortable with being extroverted. But what I really liked about Lumina was seeing how it framed those things in a positive light, and how it brought other things into that positive light. Like being introverted beyond just being quiet is people really enjoy talking to you. They have an easy time talking to you. You know, you enjoy working in smaller groups. So for me, it was just really nice to have that framed in a new light as well.
Thank you for pointing that out, because just because someone's introverted doesn't mean they're not a great presenter, right?
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, so that's my error. Thank you for pointing that out, because I think it is how we pigeonhole people. So we're really hoping that all of you will go on, try the Lumina Spark assessment on the Discoverability Network. It's free. And we look forward to getting your feedback. With that, we're going to go to questions, but thank you for joining us today. And we're going to stop the recording so that we can, have you ask your questions.